Hello everybody, and today's talk is about Aquae Sulis, or as nowadays we know it, Bath. Aquae Sulis was an important cult centre in Roman Britain. In fact, it was an important cult centre in Britain before the Romans came, because it was where a water goddess called Sul had a cult worship. And this came about because of the apparently magical hot water spring which arises out of the ground. So that's going to seem pretty magical to anybody these days, and certainly in the ancient world. Water that comes out of the ground today fell as rain on the Mendip Hills about 10,000 years ago and falls into the earth, and through geological pressure eventually is forced out again at the surface at the spa town of Bath. Anyway, so when the Romans invaded Britain, they found this cult happening, and they decided to incorporate it into their own worship, as they did in lots of other places. This was a process which nowadays we call syncretism. It's where you join religions together and treat one god as the same as another god, just known by a different name. So the Romans took the god Sul, who was Belgic perhaps, or Celtic, if we're still using Celtic as a term, and associated her with their goddess Minerva. So she was incorporated into the Roman pantheon, and that happened. It was a way of unifying peoples. It happened all over the Roman Empire. For instance, in Egypt there was a shrine to a powerful god called Ammon, and the Romans went there and said that was the cult centre of Jupiter Ammon. So very early on the Romans did quite a lot of building development in Aquae Sulis, and they built a huge set of baths there and an associated temple complex. This was certainly done by the end of the 1st century AD, and there's a number of inscriptions that date that to that particular time, as well as the main spring, which had a big stone balustrade put around it. The Romans piped the hot water that came up through their lead pipes into the so-called Great Bath of Balneum, which at a later date, perhaps 2nd, maybe 3rd century, also had a huge roof put over the top of it. Nowadays it's open to the sky, but in ancient times, certainly at that point, it probably had a roof over it too. And we know it was a very popular place to go, because there are a number of inscriptions which show that people travelled from considerable distances. More of them in a minute. It acquired quite early a reputation for healing, and people came to drink the waters, the foul-smelling, sulphurous waters, foul-smelling and foul-tasting, perhaps in the belief that if it tastes bad, it must be good for you. We, of course, have Guinness, which tastes good and is also good for you. But did it work? Well, people travelled from considerable distances to Aquae Sulis in order to take the waters, in order to sit in the water, in order to bathe there, to make offerings at the temple. We know of a woman from Metz in France, there was a stonemason from Chartres in France, and we also know of somebody from as far away as Trier on the Mosel River in Germany. All of these people either lived or in some cases died in Aquae Sulis. I suppose that goes to show that whatever healing powers the waters had, they weren't all that great. Anyway, there was also a darker side to Aquae Sulis, and that was revealed when archaeologists found a number of curse tablets. These are nowadays called, in Latin they're called Defixiones, nowadays they're called curse tablets. And these are found throughout the Roman Empire, and there's a number of these found at Bath. The way this works is, you write a curse on a piece of perhaps lead or pewter, and then you throw it into a sacred spring, or you nail it to a shrine. And there's a number of these found at Aquae Sulis. I'm going to share one or two of those with you now. So, Basilia gives to the temple of Mars her silver ring, that so long as someone, slave or free, keeps silent or knows anything about it, he may be accursed in his blood and eyes and every limb, or even have all his intestines eaten entirely away, if he has stolen the ring or been an accomplice. There's another famous curse tablet found from Bath, perhaps the most famous one, which always makes me smile slightly. May he who has stolen Vilbia from me dissolve like water. May she who has devoured her be struck dumb, whether it be Velvina or Exupereus or Verianus, and there's a list of another 6 suspects. So whoever Vilbia was, she was obviously quite a girl. That curse, like many others, was actually written backwards, and I suppose that makes it slightly secret, increases the mystery of the process, and sometimes magical words were added to these things. A bit like abracadabra, I suppose, but on some of the curse tablets from Aquae Sulis we find things like Bescu, Berebescu, Bazagra. Sometimes you find a figure roughly drawn on there as well, which might be a figure of a demon, or it might be a figure of Mercury to escort the soul of the dead across the river Styx into the underworld. One final one of these curses. May burning fever seize all her limbs, kill her soul and her heart. O gods of the underworld, break and smash her bones, choke her, let her body be twisted and shattered. Fricks, frocks. Well, scary stuff indeed. But what else might we be thinking about Aquae Sulis and its rather odd associations? Well, later it became a very fashionable spa town in the 18th century, perhaps the most fashionable place in England. All of fashionable London society wanted to be seen there. Large amounts of Georgian architecture, including the famous Royal Crescent. And by that time, of course, Bath Abbey had been built. And if you look in the crypt of Bath Abbey and some of the foundations of it, we can see that some of the stone had been robbed from the Roman settlement of Aquae Sulis. So what does all of this have to say to us today? Well, that feeling of the need for healing beyond the normal means is deeply held, even if irrational. There have always been some people who've tried to use or misuse religion for malicious purposes. But, to end on a slightly more cheerful note, maybe we should take from all this that everyone loves a spa day.